Hey guys, it's Karlo
and Izzy,
and we're back for the first video of 2023. And in today's video, we're going to give you 3 tips to improve your nighttime car photography. Hiya. So in this video, we're going to be giving you 3 tips to improve your night car photography, and we're going to be elaborating each one of these tips in future videos. So stay tuned for that. So the first tip we're going to be talking about is camera settings. Now, some people have all the gear, but no idea. Now, one of the most important things about using your camera is to make sure that you shoot in manual mode, but also knowing when to use certain settings. So today we're going to be talking about 3 important settings that you need to be able to change on the fly, and those 3 settings are shutter speed, aperture, and ISO. So without further ado, let's get into it. Before we get into the settings, you got to make sure that you use the right lens. Now, generally, I like to use prime lenses at night because they typically have lower f-stops as compared to a zoom lens. Now, the lens that I'm using today is a Sigma 30mm lens with a 1.4 f-stop. Now, some prime lenses actually go down to 1.2. So the lower the f-stop, the more light you can actually get into the camera. Now, we'll get into aperture a little bit more later on, but for now, let's talk about shutter speed. Now, shutter speed, you can't have the shutter speed too low, or else you're gonna need a tripod to shoot it. Like Izzy over here, so he's shooting a long exposure shot, and we'll cover long exposure shots and tripod use for night photography in a later video. But for now, I'm gonna be shooting handheld with 30. As you can see here, and that's letting off enough light for me to actually expose the shot right. With your ISO, you want to keep that as low as possible, because the higher the ISO, the more noise you'll have in your photos. Now, if that doesn't work and you need to put your ISO a little bit higher, then you need to make sure that your aperture is as low as possible, because the lower your aperture is, the more light gets into your camera. And if that still isn't enough, then you're gonna have to start playing around with your shutter speed and shoot at a lower shutter speed. So the next setting we're gonna be talking about is aperture. Now, right now I'm shooting at the lowest possible f-stop, which is 1.4. And basically what that means is that more light gets into my camera because it's opened up a lot more. Now, there's only so much that your camera can go through and how much you can play around with the settings. Now, of course, one of the most common things that I see people do is they try to take photos in places that are just not lit enough. Now, they think that they can, I guess, save the photo in post, but it still ends up being really, really noisy. So another tip, that brings us to our next tip, which is lighting. You got to make sure that you have enough lighting to show that enough of your subject, and that you don't have to mess around too much with the post. Because I believe that, you know, if you take the right photo the first time while it's raw, then you shouldn't have to do too much in post. Now, the third point, and it's probably one of the most important points, is location. Now, anybody could go to an underground shopping center car park and take photos and just pump out all of this content, but really the most important thing is to be creative with your photos. You got to have fun with your photos and make your photos look a little bit more unique and more appealing to the eye. So as you can see here, we're at a location. It's more of a rooftop location where you can see a backdrop of some nice buildings in the city. And look, the lighting's perfect. It's bouncing straight off the subject, and Izzy is taking some amazing photos with his tripod. And yeah, well, enough of the tips. Let's take some photos and see what we can do applying these tips. But before I do that, I'm just going to tell you what I'm actually shooting on. So I'm shooting on a Sony a6500, and the lens I am using today is a prime lens. Now, I generally like to use prime lenses, especially at night, because they typically have lower aperture on the camera, which in this case is a 1.4, but you can get some prime lenses that go all the way down to 1.2. Now, I'm going to show you the settings that I'm going to use to perfectly expose the shot. So come here with me. So I've pretty much turned all of my settings all the way down, as you can see here. Now the first thing I'm probably going to adjust is my shutter speed. So I've got my shutter speed at 500 right now, which I would never shoot at, but I've just kind of put it here for the sake of this video. So I'm going to bring it down all the way to 30. Going to bring it down to 30, but as you can see, it's still black. And I know I don't have my camera lens on. I do that sometimes, but yeah. So now we're going to adjust the aperture here. So as you can see here, you can start seeing that the camera eye is actually opening up a little bit more, letting in a little bit more light. So that's as much light as it'll go. Now, as an absolute last resort, that's when I start playing with my ISO. Now, this is where knowing your camera actually comes into play, because I know that if I go over 2000 ISO, then a lot of noise will, show up on my photos. So I'm just gonna bring up my ISO a little bit here. So it's at 1250, so 1200. So as you can see, I'm just a little bit under. I'm about 0.7 under there, which isn't too bad. Probably bring it down another 1 or 2. So see right there, oh, I'm under 2, under 1. So maybe a little bit higher. Maybe I'll go to 1000. 0.3. So see, look. So see how my exposure is pretty much at 0. Obviously, it's very temperamental. This is why I say that changing your settings on the fly is very important, because it all depends on the angle that you shoot at. So I could be shooting at this angle now and it's perfectly exposed. As you can see, it's on 0.0 right there. 0.0. That's a perfectly exposed shot. But as soon as I shift over this way, see, it's at -1. So it's really important that you understand these three settings, and that you know how to utilize them and change them on the fly. So let's take some photos and see how they look. The next one is lighting. So this is where your lighting comes into play. So as you can see, I've told the boss to perfectly line up his RS3 just adjacent to these adjacent to these lights right here. Now, that gives me enough light to highlight the key features of what I want to highlight in my photo, which is this side. Hence why I got him to turn his front wheel to the left. So yeah, because this is the most part that I want to highlight in my photos. And the most important thing of all is the location. So as you can see here, we're shooting at a rooftop car park. We're not just at a underground shopping mall or shopping center car park. Those shots can look really dull sometimes, no matter how well you take the photos or how well you edit the photos. It really comes down to what's appealing to the eye. Now, as you can see here, we have a beautiful backdrop of some buildings. Really highlights the car very well, contrasting it from the background and the foreground. So yeah, that's the location, and yeah, that's pretty much it. So that concludes our video for today. Thank you guys so much for watching. Now, if these tips helped you, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Now, even if they didn't, just give it a thumbs up anyway, and comment down below what other tips you guys want to learn about photography, or if you guys are struggling in a certain area of photography and you need a little bit of help. Yeah, and don't forget to subscribe as well. Hit that bell icon so you guys get notified with the future videos that we're going to be putting out. And yeah, we're going to be having our links down below to our Instagram, to both of our Instagrams. This is
Alpha Den Creative
and Samurai Media down below. And yeah, this is Karlo
and Izzy
signing out.
See you guys.